Hello everyone, my name is NCS07 and Persona 4 Golden, right? Ever since I finished playing Persona 5, I've really wanted to play more of the games in the Persona series. Now, I was originally going to do that by playing Persona 3 next, but I just so happened to come across a GameStop. Don't know why I was in one. And I saw a used PS Vita there, so I got that plus Persona 4 Golden and Persona 4 Dancing All Night. And before you ask, this was before the game was ported to PC, so I'm only talking about the Vita version of the game specifically in this video, not the PS2 version and not the PC version. And also, before we get into this review, of course, spoilers. There will be spoilers in this video, so if you haven't played it yet, then spoiler warning, only really watch if you've played the game, or you've seen a playthrough of the game, or whatever. I'm not the boss here, but yeah, spoilers. But anyways, with that said, without further delay, let's review Persona 4 Golden. Starting with Persona is a series that has always had great presentation. Actually, forget that. But Persona has always had the idea of high school students learning about themselves while dealing with a different world and fighting demons within that world through the use of personas. And Persona 4 is no different. Also, I'm just going to refer to P4G as Persona 4 from now on, by the way. But Persona 4 is basically based around the idea of high schoolers climbing through a TV because Persona 4, right? And use the power of Persona to work their way through dungeons to save those who are trapped in the TV world. Or, better word, thrown into the TV. And the premise is very easy to understand, although it definitely is the most accessible Persona game out there, and definitely is a pretty lighthearted game compared to the other Persona games, but still, very good idea, especially coming out 1 year after Persona 3. And the style of the game, oh, it's just beautiful. Almost every menu in the game has an overwhelming amount of yellow, which is the main color used in the game. And while it isn't as stylish as it could be, the style is still great. All the character portraits look very nice and detailed and sexy. And while the models do reek of PS2 era, it isn't too bad. I do understand. I mean, the Vita Golden was a port of Persona 4, which was on PS2, but who cares, right? The portraits look nice. But performance-wise, very good. There's not much to really say on that. Overall, Persona 4 has a great presentation that I would consider to be a work of art. Now, what about the story? Now, all the Persona games up to this point have all had very unique and deep stories with various different types of stories dealing with different topics. And while they can be different from one another, they are still understandable. And they basically take the idea of having a shadow world, I guess you could call it, or another world, and they basically put a spin on it to make it feel a little bit more original. In Persona 4, however, the story is basically more of a murder mystery. A bad one, though. Essentially, people get thrown into TVs, and you have to go through the TV world to save those thrown in. And while it is cool, it can get very predictable, because there are times where it just comes down to, oh, I saved someone, now it's time to see which person I need to save next. You do this for a while until you eventually reach someone who claims to be the killer. Or the killer only killed one person and acts faked about it. Seriously, just a side note, did anyone think Mitsuo was the killer? It's too early in the game, before Naoto even became a party member. And after they, quote-unquote, caught the killer, Naoto, who is actually looking into the mystery, actually uses herself as bait to find the killer. Without a single camera recording what happens. Yeah. In other words, no evidence really exists of who it is because of this. Seriously, I know Naoto is small, but like, really? You couldn't have just put a camera there? And this is kind of part of the issue with the story, because The story really, the problem is that this is a video game, not a movie. There's no common sense, because since you, the protagonist, has to solve the mystery, you can't have camera evidence? I really don't know. Because seriously, if this was actually used common sense, then this mystery could have been easily solved a long time ago. But since it's a video game, you, the protagonist, have to figure it out. Now eventually you do reach someone who does seem to be the killer, that being Namatame. The game could end here, but if you decide to actually really find the truth, then you reach the actual killer, that being, spoiler alert, Adachi, and then the entire town of Inaba gets covered in the fog that is present in the Shadow Realm. Now the stakes are raised more, and now this is actually the point of the game where the game starts to get a little bit more interesting. Because this is basically the point in the game where you essentially have to just figure out the killer's intentions and basically just learn about why the killer, or Adachi, really did that, which is really cool. And honestly does kind of raise the suspense factor, because you don't really know what's going to happen. Also, the bad ending, just by the way, probably one of the creepiest Naruto screams ever, I must say. It's creepy. Then you eventually take down Adachi in some huge eyeball thing, and then you basically clear the town of fog, and multiple months passed in the game to basically end at that point, because essentially the Midnight Channel is basically gone, and everything seems good. And the game could end here, but if you decide to proceed and try to press for the truth even further, you eventually reach the one who is actually behind everything in the game, that being the gas station attendant. And this is the part of the game where it starts to kind of get a little bit weird, because, again, since it's a video game, it has to have a final boss, so you fight her, which is strange, because her whole thing is she wants you to find the truth. And once you find the truth, she wants you to fight her? It's very silly, to be honest. And then once you beat her, then the game basically ends and you move back into the city. And overall, yeah, I did make it seem like the story is bad. But trust me, it's not horrible. It isn't the worst thing ever. It's definitely an engaging plot. It's a good story, but it has a lot of points in the story that are stupid. There's a lot of things that are just kind of, they don't have common sense, but then again, this is a video game, and these are high schoolers, so is common sense really a thing? I don't know. But that's enough of that, so let's continue on to the gameplay. Very similar to some of the other Persona games, this game is basically half a social simulator and half JRPG. So let's go over the social simulator part first. Now, unlike Persona 3 and 5, the setting in Persona 4 is pretty crappy, let's be honest. Inaba, there is not much to do in Inaba. Unlike the other two games where there's a lot more to do, Inaba, it's a small town. There's not a lot to do. And it does sound like it is a bad thing, but the thing is, it makes the small things you do feel that much more huge, such as completing the social links, raising your social stats, all that jazz. In my personal opinion, I do feel Persona 4 had the most consistently good social links, because, I don't know, it feels like you actually learn more about them as a person. In Persona 5, it kind of feels like they kind of just tell you their problems and you just have to fix it. But here, they actually pretty much solve their problems on their own, and you pretty much learn a lot about them throughout the social links, which is what they're supposed to be. Now, of course, there is I and Marie, but aside from them, all the other social links are at the very least somewhat interesting. Now, some are better than others, but the thing is, still pretty good. Of course, besides the two I mentioned, but of course, there are more things to do, such as working a job, reading, or fishing, so that way you could raise your social stats. And the game isn't too picky when it comes to ranking up your social stats. It's not too difficult at all, so that's really nice. I really like that. But that's really the social aspect of the gameplay, which, by the way, is great. But what about the JRPG part of the game? It's alright. Honestly, the main issue I have with this part of the game is that the dungeons all consist of random generated floors. Essentially, think Mementos or Tartarus for the entirety of the game. Yeah. That's really the only issue I have. Because really, all you have to do is just get to the top of the dungeon to fight the stupid looking boss, which doesn't seem super bad. It's basically a point A to point B kind of thing. But the problem is that there's not really much on your journey, because all you have to do is just get to the top. You just have to navigate the maze. That's all it really is. And this can unfortunately make the game kind of repetitive. Even when they change the scenery, it still feels like the same thing because there's not really much to it. And the puzzles they do have are really stupid. I remember in the 4th dungeon, the game dungeon, I got all the way to the top, and none of the other dungeons had this. I got to the very top, and it required, and I had to get a key or whatever it was, some sort of item or something. And I had to go all the way down to the 5th level, and this was like a 10 level like dungeon. So I basically had to do the dungeon basically all over again just so I could get the item and then defeat the boss. And it's very repetitive. It's just annoying, honestly. And also, part of this does kind of do it with the battling. Now, this does not mean that the battling is bad at all. It is fine, but I do feel it can be a little bit meh. I don't know. Maybe it's just how many times you'll fight in a dungeon and how repetitive things can get. But I do feel I will definitely prefer playing Persona 5 when it comes to the battle system. Now, that's no bad thing because Persona 4 came out before Persona 5, so of course it wouldn't necessarily be as good, but it does feel a lot more repetitive than normal. But really, the battling isn't too bad. Also, and this is just a really small nitpick, but I really wish they had color cues for what attacks you're doing, because you have to really look at the icon to see if what you're doing is a fire attack or if it's an ice attack. It's annoying. It can be a little annoying. But overall, though, the JRPG aspect of the game is fun, though it can get repetitive as all hell pretty easily, since it really isn't not anything more than go through the maze and find the exit. But honestly, in all honesty, the gameplay in general is really fun, but it could definitely be so much better. Music in the Persona games has always been high in terms of quality, and of course Persona 4 is no different. And while I don't necessarily like the soundtrack nearly as much as Persona 5, Persona 4 still has some really great songs. Reach Out to the Truth, Pursuing My True Self, I'll Face Myself, and so many other songs are simply great. And to be honest, all in all, Persona 4 won't murder your ears, although except for the constant reminders on low health. But otherwise, the music in the game is great, the voice acting is great, and anyone who really thinks otherwise, they're wrong. Or they just have a different opinion, but still, the music is great. Persona 4 is really good. Now, is the game perfect? No. Hell no. No game even can be perfect. And yes, I do feel that this game does have a decent amount of annoyances, but to be honest, I can honestly forgive most of them for how good everything else is. And if I'm willing to forgive some meh game design that much, that must show how special this game really is. Now, is this better than Persona 5? Well, in my opinion, no. But for what it is, on my scale from 0 to 10, I'm going to give Persona 4 Golden an 8.5 out of 10. The game really should be experienced by everyone, though this game isn't the most revolutionary thing ever. It's still a great installment in the Persona series. But those are my thoughts. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. And if this is your first time watching one of my videos, make sure to like and subscribe, because I told you to. And anyways, I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out, take care, and have a good day.
It's showtime! Did you enjoy the show? Well, time for the highlight.